Good morning, everybody, and happy Leading Change Live Day. We're doing it earlier in the month this time around because it's summertime and people have harder schedules to coordinate this time of year. But I'm so excited to have this group together. And when I say the brain power amongst this panel is impressive, I am not just saying it to say it. So we'll get into more of that as we get going. But as is always the case, when you join me for one of these, throw where you're joining from in the comments. Let us know how you're feeling or questions that you've got along the way. Otherwise, you guys are all left to the devices of the questions that come from Emma's head, which we all know can be a little bit of a scary place. So I'm going to go ladies first and have Jamie start us with our introduction. And we will go around the room and do a quick introduction of everybody while we're waiting to see the comments of where you're all joining from as well. So Jamie, can you get us started and share a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So my name's Jamie Warner. I am Managing Director of Data Science and Pricing at Plymouth Rock Assurance. Quick note that anything I say is my own opinion, not that of my employer. And I also teach adjunct for Northeastern University in the data science and AI space because I'm really passionate about this area. So I'm really excited about thinking about how we can use AI to revolutionize the way that we do insurance and make claims better and easier for everyone. I'll pass it.
Great.
Back around.
Okay, so then we're going to go kind of around the room. So Waze, and then we'll end with Steen here in a moment. So Waze, can you say a quick hello?
Hi, everyone. My name is Waze Farouk. I'm the Senior Vice President of Strategy and Transformation at Crawford & Company, and been in the insurance industry for over 15 years with State Farm, Berkshire Hathaway, Chubb. And it's been a great journey with talking about data, talking about AI, and how we're going to modernize the way we handle claims. I'm charged with building the future of claims. So at Crawford & Company, we handle small claims to all the way multi-billion-dollar claims. So excited to be here and looking forward to sharing my thoughts.
Great. And last but not least, Steen, I'm going to have you do an introduction, but I'm also going to have you do like just a little bit extra because this episode is sponsored and in partnership with Scalers AI. So I'd like you to introduce yourself as well as Scalers, and then we'll get into all the questions that we've got for the day.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thrilled to be here. And Emma, you and team produce such a fantastic platform that we were kind of thrilled to have the opportunity to sponsor the great work you do and the incredible community that you've built as well. So many fantastic insights in that regard. But yeah, I'm Steen Graham. I'm the CEO of Scalers AI. And it's a company that I founded with my co-founder about 3 years ago. And we really caught the bug of AI. And at the time, we were working in the chip field, in the hardware side, and we had the opportunity to build some cutting edge AI software platforms. And the speed of which innovation was occurring was just so fantastic. We thought that we would found a company, and Scalers AI is all about fast tracking industry transformation with generative AI. And we've been thrilled to work with clients across many different industries. But what we really get excited about is just, driving business outcomes and helping people transform their line of business, especially from, a top line perspective, solving the biggest challenges that people face in their particular industries. And so that's what gets us fired up. And that's what we've been lucky enough to do for the last 3 or so years. And we've been definitely ahead of the curve as it pertains to generative AI by getting that head start as well.
Well, I'm really excited to have you guys here. And I'm also very excited to see everybody who joined us finally woke up and is coming into the comments to let us know where they're joining from and saying good morning. So we've got everybody popping in. It's wonderful to see. And I'd like to keep that chat going with your opinions about the conversation that we're having, as well as any questions that you've got, again, for this collective brain power here, because I'm excited for this conversation. So Jamie, to get us started, I'm going to have you put that professor hat on for a second. And the reason that I want to do this is because that brain power that's collectively available might get to a level where we're talking about the technology a little bit deeper than people are used to. And I want to make sure that we've all got the same foundation going into the conversation so that we can kind of operate from that point forward. So Jamie, can you get us started by sharing a little bit about when we say Gen AI, what does that mean? And maybe how is it different than some of the other AI use cases or tools that we've seen come into the market over the last couple of years?
Absolutely, Emma. So it's important to think about the fact that generative AI is really different than the other types of AI we've thought about before, right? So traditionally, we're using AI like you can consider generalized machine learning models to predict a specific set of outcomes, like discrete outcomes. They'll be between 0 and 1, or it could be yes, no, maybe. It's going to be some set of categories, or to group things together. So that's like clustering, grouping like things together. Generative AI is not good at these types of discrete determinations. So our traditional use cases where you see a lot of AI, like underwriting and pricing, it's not going to be as useful in those cases because it's almost set to a level of too much creativity. What Gen AI is really good at is things like summarization, because it's typically predicting the next word to appear, or if it's a picture, the next pixel to appear based on all the information it knows and the new information you're giving it. And so because of that, we can change things like the temperature to make it more or less creative in its responses, but it's never going to have that discrete set of responses that our typical AI models have. So it's really helpful to think about that when we think about all the different potential use cases.
Guys, I was aggressively commenting back to everybody that let us know they were here, and it took me a hot second to get back over to the screen. Thank you so much, Jamie, for doing that. And Aways, I've got actually kind of a two-part question for you. So maybe we'll come back because you made a post this weekend that was fueled by a comment that we heard in New York at InsurTech Insights. So we'll come back to that. But first, I want to ask you a little bit of okay, so with your experience that you shared during your introduction, you understand the insurance value chain very well. And maybe some of the reasons that are standing in our way of actually getting started with innovation and taking advantage of these tools that are in front of us. And some of it goes to how that value chain works and how carriers make their money. So can you paint a little bit of that picture from your perspective on how and why we might be seeing this slow to evolve nature within the industry?
Yeah, so insurance industry, I would say, is very tenured in the business industry, right? I mean, insurance makes the world go round. If you take a look at it, a while back, I was doing some polling and trying to identify, is there a career, is there a path of any professional work that is not directly related to insurance? And when you think about it, there's not that much. Whether you're in aviation, whether you're in marine, whether you're doing agriculture, there's so much out there when it comes to risk. Everything from our walking outside to all the way us commuting on the planes, etc., and our health. Right? There's so much involved in the insurance industry, and that makes it a very firm foundation of the industry, which allows the carriers and the industry as a whole to remain strong and connected in a way that they're not necessarily rushing to deploy AI or deploy technology as fast as you may see in other sectors. So I think part of what I was mentioning was really around the fact that the insurance companies don't make a lot of money. They may make some money, or some carriers don't make any money on the policy premiums. They make their money on investments and reinvesting those assets, et cetera, to be able to generate large amount of wealth. Now, with that being said, that allows them the opportunity to be slow to change, and a lot of it is a choice versus a necessity, right? So when you think about the pandemic, it was a necessity, and everybody learned to work remotely, even the insurance companies, which is a little bit difficult to understand. But in a nutshell, I think the carriers feel confident in their ability to continue to generate profits with or without these tools, which allow them the opportunity to be able to remain ahead financially until you start to see some disruptions of newer tech companies that are coming in. And when the traditional carriers see the failure of those companies and how they're not able to generate operating profits, it kind of gives a little bit of more of a boost to say we're doing the right things because we've done it for centuries. Now, it's not right or wrong. There's a blend and mix. And one of the another key quotes that I'll mention from one of the CEOs while we were in New York. Is I asked them, "What is your strategy around AI?" And the response was, "Wait is our strategy," which was interesting in my view. Having a progressive individual saying that we're going to wait and see how this technology will play out was interesting to hear.
So playing off of, I didn't realize that you had that waiting conversation, but I also want to tap Steen and Jamie live. They're getting fed this real time from what we saw at ITI. There was somebody on the stage when they were talking about artificial intelligence and the use of it in the insurance industry, whose response was, was it AI is for lazy people? Is that
Correct.
actually, so we've got this probably viewpoint of maybe like what calculators were seen as like 35 years ago, along with this like propensity to wait and kind of like play it safe and have our cards close to our chest. First, I want to just like open it up, and I saw Jamie unmute as soon as I said that AI is for lazy people. So I'm going to have you speak first, Jamie, and then Steen, I'd love to really understand your perspective on this and like what like you're seeing working with your clients and this hesitancy to change, or maybe this belief that AI is for the lazy. So Jamie, go ahead.
I actually think that's a huge compliment. I know one of the things we say in programming is the best programmers are the lazy programmers, because they're reusing code that's already been written, that's well done, and then optimizing it. And so when I think of the things that this is good at, that traditional AI isn't, it's the things where you can be lazy, right? It's the tasks that you want to offload. So I like to think of it as like the intern sort of tasks or the administrative sort of tasks. That's exactly the point. So even if they maybe said it with the tone that I wouldn't have said it with, I think that's actually the perfect tagline here. Is it is lazy, like offload those things that you don't want to be doing, that are repetitive, that are annoying, that are really long, reading through those condo documents or whatever it might be, and be lazy in those spaces. And then you have the brain power and the people focused on the things that where they can really add value. And so I love that. Maybe I'll use it again in a more positive way.
I love your silver lining. Okay, Steen, I saw you unmute. You're ready to go as well.
Yeah, well, Jamie, just to riff off what Jamie said, a beautiful 100 lines of code is way better than 10,000 lines of code. And so, those lazy developers, are very important to us because they do write, beautiful code, and you definitely want simple, elegant software code in that regard. But I think like Jamie's comments at the onsite and in a ways comments were quite revealing. To talk about the complacency challenges, these companies have built just fantastic businesses, and I think totally understand why you'd be risk averse. Andy Grove, who was the CEO for Intel for a bit, also the 1997 Person of the Year, he kind of famously wrote in his book, you could be the subject of a strategic inflection point, or you could be the cause of one. And what Andy meant by that is your business could be disrupted, or you could drive the transformation. And so for those people that Awais alluded to that are kind of sitting around waiting as their strategy, that's the risk that they take. And there's some great statistics about the time period that companies are spending on the S&P 500 are dramatically reducing over time. Where in the 50s and 60s, companies would expect to spend over 30 years on the S&P 500, and nowadays it's in the teens. And at the forefront of the transformation we're seeing here, it's may even be like single digits, the average company on the S&P 500. So if the strategy is to wait, you better wait and then make a really good decision, because there's a huge risk in business disruption. But kind of to pair this, why that's also waiting is also smart, because what Jamie said at the onset, and this is what kind of confounds people a little bit, is the generative AI models, they outperform traditional machine learning in a lot of cases, but in a lot of cases they don't. But more importantly, like what we've all been inspired by, the large language models, they do hallucinate, and that's great because you can up their creativity level, and they can do fantastic poems or content creation. But when you're in a high fidelity industry, with financial metrics and goals, as Awais was alluding to, you can't take the risk of deploying that in your mainstream line of business. And so that's kind of why, at Scalers AI, we not only take those, incredible, innovative models, but we kind of control them through a number of techniques, notably fine tuning with companies' proprietary data. So we kind of pair that incredible innovation of the large language model with companies' proprietary innovation and data set. But that's kind of not enough. You ultimately have to also pair that real time with your data. And, the model becomes, and we do that through like a retrieval augmented generation technique. And then in that case, the model actually becomes, a user interface almost. It's got very little opportunity to hallucinate. And we're even working on new kind of more modern techniques where we're eliminating the kind of the prompt risk and the variability of prompts as well. So I think we're all on a journey to make sure that the generative AI vision can kind of meet that high fidelity requirement that you can deliver in line of business activities that drive top line revenue and solve customer problems. So it's really great to see kind of a Waze and Jamie's kind of back and forth on the juxtaposition of where we're at.
So, Jamie, I want to tap on your shoulder here because we talked a little bit about some of the differences between like Gen AI and other tools, but we didn't really dive deeply into the differences of like what we're seeing in the deployment of these tools. And so I'd love to hear a little bit more about like what you're seeing practically implementing Gen AI in comparison to other tools, or like what you're hearing from others in the market, to kind of understand how that varies.
Yeah, absolutely. So these are really interesting because they're completely different from any we've ever seen before. Historically, it's pretty cheap to train, and every company trains their own AI models for the most part. Sometimes they have a vendor, and pretty much anyone can train like a linear model. I could do it at home on my PC, so could your 10-year-old. But these newer models, the Gen AI models, which include like LLMs, so large language models, things like Llama, Claude, GPT is probably the most famous. They're very expensive to train. And by train, I mean take all that data and build the model. And so that initial data training is incredibly expensive, and we're probably not going to see a lot of companies build their own model. Instead, what we're going to do is see this, what I would call like a bolt-on, where you have that large scale model at the base, and then you run additional model on top of it, adding in your own information. So a lot of times we see that called tokens. So you would put in your own knowledge documents, maybe recordings, maybe just additional details and data to train that model to be more like your population or your company, and kind of get out what you need from it. So for example, those large scale models aren't trained with insurance vernacular in mind, right? So we need to adjust them. But you're probably not going to see a lot of insurers going and building their own GPT or their own Claude. It's just too computationally expensive, and it won't happen, which is really different from the way we've seen things happen in the past. And because of that bolt-on, I think we're going to see a lot of different partnerships. So our traditional IT partners that we're used to working with probably aren't going to be as experienced at this type of scenario. And we're going to have to think through what those partners look like. And I think Steen can probably talk a little bit more about kind of what to look for as we think about that traditional IT partner that we've had versus what we're looking for now as we go forward with this type of interaction.
So, Steen, I'm just going to let Jamie do my job and tee you up directly for that question. Take it away.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Jamie. I mean, I think Jamie alluded to the gift that we're kind of all given is these large language models do take a long time to train, and building foundational models from scratch is quite expensive. And so we have all these great techniques on how to make insurance specific models, or make insurance company specific models, or make claim specific models, that are available today to the people that kind of have been on this journey and this AI journey. And the developer tools are quite challenging insofar as there's innovations every day on a lot of fronts. And so when you're making these decisions like, hey, I want to create my own insurance specific model in this bolt-on technique, where I take an incredible model, like an open model that like Llama 3, for example, and I want to train on my company's workflows and insights and all my company's data, and I want to do something like that, you're going to want to work with people that kind of understand the AI journey. And what trade-offs are going to be made there. And so there's, like, for example, just in fine tuning a model, there's a lot of decisions you have to make, such as like what precision you want to fine tune or what fine tuning technique you want to do, that actually is a trade-off in cost, but also a trade-off in quality. And then you have to make decisions around in that bolt-on technique, how to retrieve the information accurately, from your company's data, such that you can reference and annotate and get a high fidelity response. And you need to know techniques on like how to fine tune these embeddings models, which are kind of the magic tool within this retrieval augmented generation architecture that allows us to kind of run a language model and access your company's information. And so that kind of knowledge is really important. The other knowledge is like companies that need kind of know how to work with multiple modalities, because all enterprises today, not only have text information, but they have images and video and audio information. And so you need to think about all those things. And, it's a very noisy landscape. And so you want companies that understand the breadth of all those different microservices and tools, such that they can deliver a solution in the marketplace versus kind of just a feature, or for your data science team to just get started, but may not finish one of those critical initiatives.
So one of the questions that just popped in, and I believe it was from Astrid, who asked if you guys could chime in on the compute power needed to train these insurance-specific LLMs.
Yeah, maybe just at a high level quickly, it would be helpful to make sure that everyone's aware of the difference between the base models and the kind of UI, user interface interaction. So if we think about GPT, OpenAI, which is maybe the easiest one because most people are familiar with it, you have ChatGPT, which is the website you go to and you interact. You can type stuff, you can put stuff in, you can upload a picture, whatever, and have it respond. That's the user interface or the UI. Then behind that, there's actually a model running. And the cool thing about the model, which would be GPT, I think 4 is the most recent one right now, is that you can actually build on top of that backend model. And so a lot of times if your data teams or your IT teams are building, that's what they're talking about. They're talking about the model behind the user interface that you're seeing online. And so when we think about those models, it's a pretty different circumstance than a lot of insurance companies. I like to think of it as like almost headcount, because it's a usage-based fee. So whenever you train something new on that model, you're paid for the amount of data you put in and the amount of time you're training on like a cloud environment. And that kind of ebbs and flows, and it's much harder to predict than, say, your traditional costs. So I like to think of it as almost like a salaried employee on its own, because it is a continuous repetitive cost. I think, Steen, you could probably talk a little bit more about the specifics of like the cost of different types of training. But I think that's a very different way of thinking. With our current AI models, the costs are much lower, and you don't really have to think of them that way, because you're not paying for usage of the model, because the model is open source typically.
Yeah. And as Jamie kind of alluded to, the gift that we've been given, and I think kind of the anchor tenant in the industry is actually Meta, because they've made some fabulous contributions to open source with very permissible licenses. So the biggest open model known to folks today is Llama 3, which performs kind of in that range of GPT. What we typically do is we can take a company's like an insurance specific data set, for example, and we pair it and we use the term fine tune it, which is kind of the bolt-on approach that Jamie said. We actually customize that base model for an industry. And that's really like, as far as we've done that with like as low as a 4 node cluster in a week. It just depends on kind of the fidelity at which you're targeting and the technique you use as well. So using traditional fine tuning requires like, let's say like, order like 4 to 10x the number of servers as, if you use these cool new techniques we have around fine tuning like QLoRa and LoRa. So it's like really specific to the quantity of data, the technique at which we use, and the quality goal that we have. So all of these things are very custom, but they're becoming more and more affordable to make it happen. Like it is definitely possible in thousands or tens of thousands of dollars to make what was once done in tens of millions of dollars today. So the cool things is it gets better and better. And the time from research paper on new innovative technique to make this happen to, us having code up and running to do it is now like transitioning into the weeks time frame. So it's just like a really incredible space to be in. And if it's too expensive now for you, I think just wait a month.
Give it like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Well, and the one thing that I would say for anybody that felt like, Christine, you just let your big brain show. For anybody that felt like there was a little bit of foreign language happening in there, just remember that there are people like Steen that you can hire to bring in to do these things. Or again, lots of other like people like Jamie with expertise within your organization that you can go to and ways to talk through these things and maybe make sense of how that comes into your situation and exactly that what that looks like for you. And I just saw Astrid come in and say, thank you. That was very helpful, you guys. So great job with that question. I did see a couple of other questions come in that I want to address before we get to the real meat of like the promise of this conversation and talking through some more of the use cases and exactly what we're seeing kind of take shape. So the next question that came up would be, so do you agree that instead of creating insurance LLM models, we need to understand the problems with existing AI models and solve for insurance workflows and create AI agents to address those challenges? Whoever wants to unmute and speak first gets to go.
I could take a stab at it from a fifth grader since they're so techie, Jamie and Steen. I think Amrita asked the question, and I think it's spot on, right? It's about the workflow. It's about identifying what is the problem that you're trying to solve. And as Jamie was alluding to, there are going to be a lot of components that help put all of the pieces to the puzzle together. And I think it's easy for the business or the operations folks, having lived in the operations, to say, just solve the problem for me and come back. But I don't want to tell you what the problem is. There are a lot of problems. So I think the first step is to identify what is it that you're looking to solve and what are you going to gain out of that before you start solving it. I mean, we can solve every problem that exists out there, but if it's not having enough impact on you and your business and your operations, is that the right approach to it? So I'll pass it back to them to get a little techie and share that piece with you.
I think the heart of the question is a fair question insofar as like there's like these agent techniques and there's all these alternative approaches. I think that I would just kind of anchor on what Jamie said at the onset is that generative AI models are not originally built for high fidelity, compliance-based applications that, your company's on the line for. And so ultimately, most of us are going to use like most of my clients are looking for like 99.9% accuracy. And so they're going to use multiple techniques. They're also looking to showcase their company's proprietary knowledge and insights. And so creating a custom model is important. Pairing that with like a custom database and data set for high fidelity, and then integrating into custom kind of agentic workflows is kind of the forefront of innovation on what people are doing today. So, but they're kind of throwing everything at it to get to that 99.9% quality. And that's where, just to be fair with what Awais said earlier, if you went and jumped on this too early, and you were just running a foundational model API right to your customers, which some companies did, your brand reputation was on the line and your quality was on the line. And so that's why the wait strategy, it really did make sense, as well. So.
Yeah, and I would just add to that I think the really cool thing about a lot of these technologies right now is that there is a human in the loop, right? So I don't know that we necessarily need to solve all the challenges with the underlying model to be able to use it and make it useful, because we still have a lot of these applications are summarizing a document for a claims adjuster, pulling from a knowledge base, helping with coding, right? Making the code process faster. You should still be checking it. So there's still that human piece in the loop where we have that double check. I think the other thing I like to think about with a lot of this stuff is I always go back to what's the current scenario. So we very rarely compare the bias in an AI model to what's the current bias that already exists in our process. And I think it's important to think about what's the baseline bias. If I have really high turnover in my claims adjusters, for example, or my first notice of loss folks, what bias is that compared to what bias I get from the model? So they're going to be different biases, but they're both going to have bias. The other thing is kind of a lot of thinking about what did we train on? So all of these large language models are trained on the data on the internet. And so they're going to have biases based on our historical acts and behaviors. I know we've seen the one where they always tag nurses as women and doctors as men. Things like this is the corpus that it's trained on. So we can add in information to retrain it, and then we can use that human in the loop to continuously give feedback. But it's not going to get to the point where it's perfect, which is why I love going back to that lazy example of using it for the lazy tasks and then you have the time to double check. So that is a really exciting option for it.
So Rachel in the comments also asked a question. I'm not going to pull it up because it's so big that it'll be overwhelming on the screen. But she was asking what sort of corpus of text knowledge exists out there for training claims specific LLMs. And, if a third party wants to build this, do they need to essentially partner with a few carriers to get access to that? So we'll stop there and I'll open it up because Jamie, I see you're still unmuted. So you go ahead.
So I think the first thing is helping understand what the corpus is. So if we think about the corpus, that's just the information or words and kind of dictionaries of what the terms are. And the reason that's really important is because, for example, in claims, insurers use lots of acronyms and terms that are not common in everyday language. So if you think about the training of the models that we've used, it doesn't exist in a lot of those training algorithms. This is not a new challenge for insurance. Unfortunately, with all the history of text mining, NLP, natural language processing, we've had this same problem where there will be these great models that come out and then they don't work on our data because we don't have that dictionary. My dream, Rachel, would be that all the insurers would come together and create a useful corpus. I haven't seen that happen in the last decade, so I don't think that's necessarily how it's going to happen, but I do think this is going to give larger insurers a huge advantage because they're going to have a lot more data to train on and add in. And I am hoping that groups like the NAIC or others will consider starting to collect this data as we think about really making the best outcome for our customers, because at the end of the day, it's a better customer outcome if we can lower that cost and improve that model.
Well, Jamie, what we're going to do is we're going to take that little quote from today and we're going to make a video of it and you're going to post it and everybody that was here is going to support it so that hopefully your dream one day comes true.
Everybody tell Barry that it's what we want from them.
Exactly. We'll demand it as a grassroots effort. All right. So we've got some time now for us to dive into use cases and really talk about, we've talked about the theory and how we're seeing things take shape and training them. Now we want to talk about what that actual outcome looks like. And again, if there are more questions, continue to put them in the comments. I'll make sure that we loop back around before we're done. But Jamie, you had a really nice use case that I think can get us started talking through all of this and then kind of starting to kind of riff off of one another and go through the different use cases that we're seeing make a big splash. And selfishly, this is a topic I talk a lot about. So I want you to kind of get us started talking through those use cases and maybe how we can use AI to do some extra training and kind of filling some gaps for us.
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest use cases in the claim space is really acting as almost a trainer and a knowledge gatherer, because we have high turnover. That's a hard area, especially post-COVID, to fill. And we've seen really good cases out of being able to summarize knowledge documents and also find the right knowledge document. So you've got someone who's in there either in the call center or as an adjuster, and they're looking for, do we cover this? Do we know this information? Did someone else already do this? And they can really easily pull that, summarize, and find what doc it's coming from. And that saves us a lot of time being able to get people to the desk faster because they're able to have those resources at their fingertips. Same sort of thing around summarizing, for example, condo docs when we're looking at a policy. Those can be thousands of pages and really difficult to get through. That sort of stuff can be summarized up. But I'm also curious, I know Awais has a lot in this space that he's been thinking about.
Yeah, Awais, go ahead.
Yeah, spot on, Jamie. And I think that's kind of where my head is, a lot of that conversational AI, trying to identify what exists in the files. How can that be leveraged? I think just from a customer service standpoint, it really boils down to, can you individualize the service to me? Do you know me before I call you? Or when I call you, you know everything about me and my claim, and what is it that's going to make a difference in making a decision and or moving the claim forward, right? That's the one thing that I was taught as I was coming up in claims, is really around take the ball down the yard, right? Just keep on moving the claim forward. And every time you make that touch point with a customer, with an insured or a claimant or whoever it is are you moving that claim forward and leveraging technology enough to be able to make the decision and know what's pending, right? A lot of times we talk about the file notes and everything that exists within those file notes. We used to do these things called pending notes. So you knew, hey, here are the 5 things that I need to ask the person, whether it's a police report, whether it's medical records or anything else. You've got a list of those items, and along the way, that gets missed, or you just constantly keep copying it. But now with the technology, as the person is speaking, as they're giving you more information, it's revalidating that claim and saying, do you now have new information that you did not before? Or whether it's letter writing, to advancing your capability to quickly writing denial letters, and being lazy to accelerate. So instead of spending, half hour trying to write up a letter from scratch, or an hour writing a letter from scratch, you could do it in a few minutes. In addition to, can you have that conversation with the policy? If you have some complex scenarios where a claim has come up, it's occurred to someone else, to exactly what Jamie's talking about, can you leverage that knowledge within your organization and within the industry to be able to make a better decision? So essentially, having digital twins, there's a lot of different use cases to be able to accelerate the work. Think about you not having to schedule an inspection if you're a field adjuster, or if you're trying to get some information from someone, you could just deploy your digital agent to be able to go get that information from the right individual.
I like the idea of having having a conversation with the policy. I've talked a lot about that. I don't know if it's never ever been phrased that way specifically to me, but I know, especially on the agent side, I was giving a presentation kind of on artificial intelligence 101. And that was one of the biggest questions that the agents had, is how do we get all of our carrier partners to give us the ability to have these conversations, using your terms, ways, have these conversations with the policy and allow our clients to do the same, so that we can help bridge that education gap within our industry, because so many people don't know how to make sense of those massive documents and what's covered and what's not. Steen, I saw you unmuted when I started talking, so I don't know if you want to go off of what Away said, or if you've got some other use cases that you want to pop up to the table as well.
Oh, I do have other use cases, but I think I think one of the things that's really incredible about what Jamie and Away said is that both of their use cases are kind of their common use cases, really about putting your employees in a position to succeed. And the incredible thing about kind of this Gen AI transformation is it's, in many cases, it's just making better search, better employee onboarding experiences. And as Away said, the ability to chat not only with the kind of the corpus of a policy, but all of your company's policies and procedures in near real time. And so this is an incredible opportunity just to put employees in a position to succeed, to delight customers, to onboard new employees faster, instead of traditional PowerPoint onboarding presentations. Give them this incredible language-based user interface to be able to pull up all of your company's procedures, and so they can learn it in near real time. And even with clients, one of the things that we're also seeing is wanting to listen kind of ambiently to the customer's questions, and being able to prompt the employee, in the loop with how to answer those questions as well. So if a customer has a policy question, you can use kind of, the audio search capability to actually search that in real time. Therefore, kind of teeing up the right answer for your employees at the right time, and putting them in a position to succeed there. So I think it's incredibly fantastic what we can do today to input new employees, existing employees, in a position to either save time, do a better job, and delight their customers as well.
So we've got a couple of minutes left, and I certainly don't want to cut anybody off if there's a burning use case that they would like to discuss. But one of the things that I really love to do at the end of these is kind of do like around the room, like if you could get everybody to remember one thing when we leave this conversation, what would that one thing be? And since Steen, you've gone last every time, I want to come to you first and we'll work our way around to Jamie to kind of give those like last thoughts that you guys have. Again, if you could get somebody to remember one thing from this conversation, what would it be? So Steen, you're up first. There you go.
I would, just one more use case, because the art of the possible. I'm just going to double down. I think this kind of knowledge management for employees thing is incredible, but I have to kind of, talk about some of the kind of the forefront of innovation today. I think what I'm seeing a lot in the industry is people that want to kind of do things like simulate weather patterns, kind of be able to predict what's coming for their clients, give their clients early warning, tips and insights on, what should they do with, some of their most trusted properties, give them incentives to do the right thing, to put their properties in a great position in the future. And then ultimately, like, be able to use kind of modern, satellite information, generative AI tools to actually make the claim as fast as possible within the regulatory requirements and fidelity requirements as well. And so I just feel like, what is perceived to be like a back end process that, insurers are kind of have been looking at is now becoming kind of a front end predictive AI process as well. So I think, knowledge management today, put your employees in a position to succeed, transform your business to tomorrow to delight your customers is another huge opportunity. And that's why, the strategy to wait may not be the best strategy. You might want to jump on it and learn as soon as possible. So, but sorry to hit on one more use case.
Well, I was going to say, was that last part of like, don't wait, jump on it as soon as possible, your takeaway, or do we have more like wisdom coming?
I will take that as I will take that as my takeaway. I think it's great to wait, but if you're going to wait, learn. And the best way to learn, though, is to get involved with one small thing, try one thing. And it's great to be conservative, but if you're not participating in the learning process, you're not going to learn as fast.
I love that. All right, Mr. Aways, your last takeaway for everybody before we make our way.
Yeah, I would say, learn from Jarvis. I always think about this as I'm talking about AI is, there's going to be a day. Jarvis from Iron Man, for those of you that are not familiar, from 2000, we came, you take a look at that technology alone and how it was displayed to where we are today is having that conversation, knowing everything about you and your business is going to evolve. We were used to manually looking at things to then spreadsheets, then it became pivot tables, and now it's essentially all data, which you're going to have accessibility to. And I love where Steen was headed around the futuristic view of whether it's catastrophe or anything else. Know your customers' demands before they make them, and know what's going to happen in claim files or in underwriting. How can you be predictive? How can you have a conversation about your employees? So it's all about making sure that we're able to leverage the technology, not be lazy, but be smart. I think this is a reoccurring theme in this particular chat is like, how can we be smart about the way we utilize technology to make us more efficient, to be able to gain a better customer experience for our customers, and have a conversation, be open-minded to the art of possibilities instead of just going back to our corners of saying this is how we always do it. We've always worked off of spreadsheets, and I could do more magic with spreadsheets than AI.
I just I'm laughing over here, Ways, because I know your love for pivot tables and spreadsheets. So it just makes me giggle a little. All right, Jamie, I would love for you to help us ride into the sunset with our episode with your final takeaway.
Sure. So first, I just wanted to add on to that comment Steen made about resilience, which I love, because with all these tools, we can do a lot more around prevention and driving resilience for our customers, not just dealing with it after it happened, which I think is something that other departments can do to help claims here. The secondary piece is for the advice. I really always like to tell my interns that they're really lucky that this is the time they get to be the dumbest person in the room and ask all the questions. And I think it's the same right now for AI. It's moving so fast that it is really okay to lean into being the least educated, dumbest person in the room and ask all the questions. And along those lines, my real advice would be just start. Like go to one of the GPTs, maybe not on your work computer if it's blocked, and try to ask it some questions. Google different things, kind of ask your peers, put those questions out there, because I guarantee everyone is just as confused and unsure as you are. And this is the perfect time to lean into that. So later you'll know.
Wonderful. Well, thank you to the three of you for joining me for the discussion, and Scalers for helping sponsor the event, and for everybody who has been in the chat asking questions, contributing to the discussion, and of course, just letting us know where you're joining from. These conversations are always my favorite to run, and I love the opportunity to learn from my guests as well as the questions that are coming in from everybody. So thank you again to the three of you and everybody for joining us, and have a wonderful day, everyone.